Beneath the polished marble floors and gold-trimmed chapels of Vatican City lies a vast hidden labyrinth, a sealed, fortified repository that stretches over 50 miles in length. Its name is almost unassuming, the Vatican Apostolic Archive, but its reality is anything but ordinary. This is not a simple library of scripture. It is a vault of forbidden knowledge, where time seems frozen and truth is entombed behind locked doors and centuries of silence. The Church claims it is a scholarly archive, a harmless collection of correspondence and canon law. But if that were true, why are so few allowed inside? Why is access restricted to a select elite, and even then only in carefully redacted fragments? Why is photography banned, and why has no comprehensive catalog ever been made public? Whispers drift through the corridors of esoteric history, rumors of books that predate the Bible, gospels that were exiled instead of canonized, grimoires written not by men but dictated by something older. Some say the archive contains documents proving extraterrestrial contact, ancient magical systems from Babylon, and the lost writings of the early Gnostics that describe a god far different from the one preached in cathedrals. Others speak of locked rooms where ritual artifacts are kept under eternal guard, or prophecy scrolls so devastating that even popes have refused to read them. A few have claimed that somewhere, buried in the deepest layers of the archive, there exists a book that names the end, not as apocalypse, but as unveiling. It is not what is in the Vatican's vaults that terrifies. It is what the silence surrounding them implies. For centuries, empires have risen and fallen, but the archive remains untouched, its contents unrevealed. If knowledge is power, then this is the most powerful room in the world. And the question is no longer what is hidden, but why they've gone to such great lengths to ensure we never see it. The origins of the Vatican Secret Archive trace back through centuries of political power, theological conflict, and historical upheaval, embedding it deeply in the fabric of both religious and secular history. Though formally established as an independent institution in 1612 by Pope Paul V, the foundation of this archive began much earlier, during the primitive days of the Roman Catholic Church, when the preservation and control of knowledge became synonymous with authority itself. From the very beginning, church leaders understood that written records could define not only the narrative of the past, but also the direction of the future. As early Christianity evolved into a formal institution, it began collecting texts that were more than sacred. They were strategic. When Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity in the 4th century, and later helped establish it as the state religion of the Roman Empire, the Church inherited the tools of bureaucracy, scribes, imperial decrees, and archives. The early papacy accumulated ecclesiastical correspondence, theological disputes, council records, and documents from newly forming Christian communities across the Mediterranean. These early records were not just of spiritual interest, but political, shaping the Church's authority as both a religious and governing body. As the Western Roman Empire crumbled, the Catholic Church filled the vacuum. It preserved literacy and record-keeping in a Europe increasingly fragmented by warfare and illiteracy. Monasteries became repositories of not only biblical texts, but also classical philosophy, scientific speculation, and controversial theology. Over time, as heterodox ideas were condemned and certain sects declared heretical, the Church's leadership quietly relocated forbidden texts to Rome. There, away from wandering eyes, a parallel library began to grow. One not meant to inspire faith, but to protect the institution from dissension. The Middle Ages only deepened the Vatican's appetite for collection and control. As theological disputes multiplied and heresies flared, Arianism, Catharism, Gnosticism, the Church responded by not only eliminating heretics, but preserving records of their teachings. Some texts were destroyed, but many were catalogued, copied, and archived, hidden away as reference points for inquisitors and scholars of orthodoxy. This paradoxical habit, preserving what it publicly condemned, formed the strange duality at the heart of the Vatican archive. It was both weapon and shield. With the invention of the printing press in the 15th century, the flow of ideas accelerated beyond the Church's ability to censor them in real time. Fearful of the masses gaining access to banned knowledge, the Church began redoubling its efforts to gather and restrict dangerous texts. Writings by astronomers, alchemists, and proto-scientific thinkers, those who dared question geocentrism or divine infallibility, were quickly indexed, condemned, and in many cases, stored. At this point, the secret archive was more than a collection. It was a fortress, a vault where the explosive power of forbidden truth was contained beneath layers of ritual, bureaucracy, and fear. Pope Paul V's formal establishment of the archive in 1612 codified what had already become a long-standing practice: concealment as preservation. The Latin word secretum referred not to secrecy in the modern sense of espionage, but to privacy, belonging solely to the Pope, yet the outcome was the same. Access became restricted, the contents catalogued in opaque ways, and researchers forbidden from even knowing what questions they were not allowed to ask. Throughout the 17th and 18th centuries, the archive continued to expand. It absorbed materials from inquisitions across Europe and beyond, internal documents from suppressed monastic orders, and diplomatic letters between the Vatican and monarchs from every corner of the known world. The documents grew stranger and more diverse. Descriptions of indigenous religions in the New World, maps of unknown territories, notes on magical rituals encountered by missionaries, and even early scientific treatises deemed incompatible with doctrine. In the 19th century, amid revolutions and rising secularism, the archive's contents became a source of speculation and myth. Writers, historians, and occultists began to imagine what treasures, or horrors, might be hidden behind the locked gates of the Vatican's vaults. While most of the world marched toward democracy and transparency, the Church reinforced its walls. What it kept inside, few knew. But those who tried to reveal it often found themselves discredited, excommunicated, or silenced. In 1881, Pope Leo XIII made a gesture toward openness by allowing limited scholarly access. Yet that access came with caveats. No photography, no browsing, only pre-approved requests with exact references. Even now, less than 10% of the total collection has been properly indexed. The vast majority remains unseen by anyone outside a very select clerical elite. In 2019, in a symbolic rebranding, the Vatican renamed the archive to the Vatican Apostolic Archive. But the change was cosmetic. The secrecy remains, and the silence continues to speak louder than words. As the Vatican's archive grew in scope and secrecy, so too did its role as a mechanism not only of preservation but of control. Specifically, the control of knowledge. From the earliest days of Christian orthodoxy, the Church recognized that some texts carried the power to unsettle, to provoke doubt, or to directly contradict the narratives it labored to construct. Censorship, therefore, became not simply a protective act, but a theological imperative. To control doctrine, one had to control the written word, and that control extended not just to religious material, but to science, philosophy, and historical record. Through the centuries, a vast process of erasure unfolded. Not always through flames and destruction, but through concealment, silencing, and deliberate omission. The most visible tool of this campaign was the Index Librorum Prohibitorum, the Index of Forbidden Books. First published in 1559 by the Roman Inquisition under Pope Paul IV, the Index was an official list of publications deemed heretical, immoral, or otherwise dangerous to the faith. For nearly 400 years it functioned as a blacklist for ideas, encompassing authors ranging from Galileo and Copernicus to Voltaire, Descartes, and Giordano Bruno. This suppression was not merely symbolic. Books found on the Index were banned under threat of excommunication, and many were burned in public rituals designed to both punish and warn. Even after the Index was officially abolished in 1966, its legacy endured, and the Vatican's unspoken authority over theological truth remained intact. But the erasure extended far beyond the Index. Within the Vatican Secret Archive, entire categories of knowledge were quietly buried, not denounced. Apocryphal Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, and the Gospel of Judas, were either excluded from canon or destroyed in public view, while copies or summaries were locked away. These Gospels offered radically different portrayals of Christ and his message, portrayals that emphasized internal enlightenment, personal gnosis, and sacred femininity, all of which posed a direct challenge to the hierarchical structure of the institutional Church. By suppressing these texts and maintaining exclusive access to them, the Church effectively defined Christian orthodoxy through exclusion. Equally troubling is the fate of mystical and esoteric writings that predate or parallel Christian theology. Texts on Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, alchemy, astrology, and early Kabbalah were often seized by Church authorities, not only during inquisitions, but through the missionary conquests of the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Scrolls, artifacts, codices, many were never destroyed but disappeared into the private vaults beneath the Vatican. The logic was simple. To eliminate a belief system, you must first control its memory. To silence a tradition, you do not need to burn its books. You need only ensure no one else can read them. Throughout the medieval period, this approach extended to internal dissent. Records of the Cathars, the Bogomils, and other so-called heretical Christian sects were systematically collected during their extermination and preserved as case studies in error. But in preserving them, the Church inadvertently created a hidden library of forbidden theologies, spiritual systems that emphasize duality, reincarnation, the divine feminine, and personal enlightenment over institutional mediation. These ideas, once buried, have begun to resurface in modern esoteric movements, but their core texts remain locked behind Vatican walls. The Renaissance and Enlightenment periods posed a significant threat to the Church's monopoly on knowledge. Thinkers like Bruno, who envisioned an infinite universe filled with countless worlds, or Galileo, whose telescopic discoveries contradicted the Church's geocentric cosmology, were targeted not merely for blasphemy, but for possessing and publishing knowledge that undermined the biblical worldview. Bruno, it is said, possessed books and writings, some of which may have originated from or referenced hidden Vatican texts, that speculated on the soul, magic, and the metaphysical structure of reality. His execution in 1600 was not just a punishment, it was a message. And yet, according to some accounts, his confiscated materials were never destroyed, but absorbed into the archive. Another layer of suppression involved the Church's encounters with non-European cultures. Missionaries returning from China, India, and Mesoamerica brought with them accounts of cosmologies, rituals, and philosophical systems that predated Christianity by millennia. These texts, if allowed to circulate, would have presented devastating challenges to the notion of Christian uniqueness. As a result, many were seized under the guise of protecting the faithful from pagan error and sent directly to the Vatican. The fate of the Mayan codices, for instance, almost entirely destroyed by Spanish friars, remains a haunting example of cultural erasure. And yet, there are persistent rumors that a few copies survived and were transported to Rome, where they remain unreadable to all but a chosen few. Inquisitorial records form another massive, disturbing component of the archive. Trials, confessions under torture, denunciations of witches and mystics. These are not simply legal documents but psychological profiles of an era. They contain details of magical practices, visionary experiences, and rituals that stretch back to ancient times. These records could serve as a unique anthropological and spiritual repository, but instead they are kept sealed, reinforcing the Church's preference for control over illumination. The Church also practiced preemptive censorship by discouraging literacy itself. For centuries, the Mass was conducted exclusively in Latin, a language inaccessible to most lay people. Bibles were chained to pulpits, and personal interpretation was discouraged or outright forbidden. This environment of dependency ensured that any unauthorized knowledge could be filtered, redacted, or buried before it ever reached the public consciousness. And the Vatican's archive became the final destination for these redactions, where the remnants of banned thought were interred like theological corpses. It is in this way that the Vatican Secret Archive became not just a sanctuary for documents, but a silent graveyard of erased realities. The world we think we know, the religious doctrines, the historical timelines, the philosophical debates, has been shaped in part by what was allowed to survive, and even more profoundly by what was not. We must ask ourselves how much of our understanding has been curated by the absences deliberately created by those in power. The Church has long maintained that its restrictions are in place to prevent confusion, misinterpretation, and spiritual harm. But in shielding the faithful from dangerous ideas, it has also denied generations access to alternate perspectives, forgotten voices, and suppressed truths. The archive is not simply a reflection of the Church's past. It is a record of what it fears most, not heresy, not rebellion, but the awakening that knowledge can bring. And that fear continues to shape the silence. Despite the Vatican's carefully constructed narrative of the archive as a mere repository of ecclesiastical documents, papal bulls, administrative correspondence, and diplomatic letters, whispers persist of what truly lies hidden within. For centuries, scholars, occultists, and insiders have speculated that the most significant contents of the Vatican Secret Archive are not its political records, but the materials never meant for public eyes. Ancient manuscripts, forbidden codices, relics of lost civilizations, and the spiritual knowledge that could radically reshape humanity's understanding of its own origins and potential. These are not merely ideas but records, documents bound in human skin, texts written in forgotten languages, scrolls inscribed with symbols that no university has ever officially deciphered. The archive is said to contain things that speak to humanity's deepest fears and most dangerous hopes, locked in climate-controlled rooms, sealed by tradition and threat. At the core of these theories is the claim that the archive houses a collection of Gospels excluded from the canonical Bible, not simply the well-known apocrypha, but other, far more esoteric writings. Among these are alleged to be versions of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene that position her not only as a disciple, but as Christ's metaphysical counterpart, possibly even his spiritual successor. Others refer to a Gospel of the Serpent, which reinterprets the Garden of Eden myth as a parable of liberation through forbidden knowledge, aligning it more closely with Gnostic cosmology than with the dogmas of original sin. Still others tell of Gospels from Eastern sects and mystery cults whose teachings predate Christianity yet mirror its metaphysical structure, raising uncomfortable questions about origin, influence, and authorship. Beyond the Gospels are texts from outside the Christian world entirely. Sumerian clay tablets unearthed in the early 20th century are said to have made their way into the Vatican vaults under the guise of academic preservation. These texts, when translated, contain references to sky beings descending in fire and cloud, accounts eerily similar to biblical descriptions of divine encounters. Some researchers believe these may be among the oldest recorded stories of contact with non-human intelligences, buried in religious symbolism, but hinting at technologies and cosmologies unknown to ancient man. Whether these were gods, angels, or something else entirely, the decision to lock them away suggests a fear not just of heresy, but of paradigm collapse. Another category of contents is believed to include occult manuscripts confiscated during inquisitions and witch hunts, grimoires like the Grand Grimoire, the Red Dragon, and the Key of Solomon, books allegedly capable of summoning spirits, binding demons, or altering physical reality through ritual, are rumored to be preserved in pristine condition within the archive. Though versions of these texts circulate publicly, it is believed the Vatican holds original versions, annotated in multiple hands across centuries, and including rituals too dangerous to publish. Some even claim that certain volumes are bound shut with alchemical seals, only to be opened under strict ceremonial guidelines. The implication is that the Church does not reject magic outright. It studies it, contains it, and ensures it cannot be used against them. Perhaps more provocative are the persistent rumors of technological artifacts, mechanical devices, astronomical instruments, and schematic diagrams that do not align with the capabilities of their time. The most infamous of these is the so-called chronovisor, a device allegedly constructed in the 1950s by Father Pellegrino Ernetti, a Benedictine monk and scientist. The chronovisor was said to allow one to view past events, like a spiritual television tuned to the fabric of time. Ernetti later retracted his claims under pressure, but documents, testimonies, and even alleged photographs have fueled speculation that the device, or its conceptual equivalent, was based on deeper knowledge contained within the archive. Some have suggested the machine was dismantled because it confirmed not only religious history, but contradicted much of it. Others believe the device still exists, guarded and suppressed due to its implications for free will, prophecy, and surveillance of the soul. Also buried in this treasure trove are believed to be relics and artifacts of enormous spiritual power. Pieces of the true cross, the spear of Longinus, the bones of saints not canonized for political reasons, and even objects recovered from ancient temples now lost to war or decay. The Vatican has the means, the networks, and the historical incentive to acquire such items and store them beyond reach. In a world where sacred objects are hunted by collectors, destroyed by conflict, or dismissed by modernity, the Church has quietly become the world's most discreet and selective museum. Even more disturbing are accounts of documents that reveal suppressed historical truths, records of deals with fascist regimes, correspondence with secret societies, and minutes from ecumenical councils that paint a very different picture of theological evolution. There are claims that certain texts reveal the Church's role in the concealment of lost civilizations, Atlantis, Lemuria, or the legendary city of Enoch. If true, these documents would rewrite the timeline of human development and reposition the Vatican as not merely a spiritual center, but as a gatekeeper of pre-Diluvian knowledge. There is also reason to believe the archive holds texts pertaining to non-human entities, descriptions of angelic beings not found in Scripture, maps of the spiritual planes, and classifications of entities encountered during exorcisms or mystical visions. These may include names, symbols, and instructions for contact or containment. The exorcism files themselves, compiled over centuries, are said to include phenomena that defy medical or psychological explanation. Some suggest that behind the veil of theology lies a catalog of metaphysical threats known only to the highest initiates. Despite public denial, the Vatican continues to expand the archive. Each year, new materials are added, What those materials are, and why they require such isolation, remains undisclosed. It is not unreasonable to wonder whether the greatest secrets of the Vatican are not its past, but its present, what it continues to receive, observe, or prepare for. Thus, what lies within the Vatican Secret Archive may never be known in full, but based on the testimonies of those few granted partial access, the rumors from former clergy, and the patterns of censorship and concealment practiced by the Church over centuries, one thing is certain: what is inside is not inert. It is alive with consequence, vibrating with the energy of suppressed revelation. The archive is not just a vault of old paper. It is a psychological, spiritual, and perhaps even interdimensional firewall, guarding not what we are not ready to see, but what those in power are not willing to lose. Within the vast and dimly lit corridors of the Vatican Secret Archive, there exists more than just volumes of text. Hidden amidst the handwritten scrolls and preserved manuscripts are countless layers of symbols, codes, ciphers, and encrypted diagrams, many of which remain undeciphered or deliberately obscured. These symbols are not mere decoration or monastic embellishment. They are intentional, precise, and often ancient in origin, reaching back into pre-Christian mystery traditions, Kabbalistic secrets, Hermetic thought, and long-lost esoteric lineages. Their presence suggests a hidden curriculum buried beneath the official doctrine, an architecture of meaning designed not for the masses, but for the initiated few. Medieval codices discovered in the archive often feature strange sigils woven into the margins, symbols not found in mainstream ecclesiastical heraldry, but bearing resemblance to magical alphabets, such as Theban script or Enochian, attributed to angelic communication. These marks are sometimes paired with references to obscure numerologies, planetary configurations, or Hebrew characters arranged in patterns that evoke ceremonial Kabbalah. It is widely believed that these manuscripts were encoded by sects within the Church, who practiced esoteric Christianity, a branch that viewed Christ's teachings not as historical edicts, but as metaphysical keys. Many of these hidden codes serve dual purposes. Some are protective, meant to keep the uninitiated from unlocking powerful knowledge. Others function as metaphysical maps, pathways to understanding divine structures, celestial hierarchies, and spiritual laws that cannot be conveyed directly in language. To the trained eye, these manuscripts operate more like grimoires than theological texts, teaching through geometry, ratio, and mystical inference rather than exposition. Renaissance-era documents attributed to Jesuit scholars in the archive also contain elaborate ciphered letters, believed to use early forms of steganography. These writings may have carried secret theological messages, political strategies, or even esoteric instructions embedded within seemingly mundane ecclesial language. One recovered fragment, never made public but allegedly seen by approved researchers, features a full-page diagram resembling the Tree of Life from Jewish mysticism, overlain with a crystalline structure whose points correspond to planetary hours and archangelic names. The implication is startling, that the Church was not only aware of other metaphysical systems, but sought to integrate them silently beneath the surface of orthodox belief. Another layer of symbology lies in the archive's treatment of the divine feminine. Manuscripts referencing Sophia, Shekinah, or early depictions of Mary Magdalene are interwoven with floral geometry, spirals, crescent moon symbols, and serpentine lines, motifs that appear across pre-Christian fertility iconography. Some believe that these visual elements encode suppressed teachings regarding the sacred union of masculine and feminine energies, preserved in cryptic form to evade ecclesiastical censorship. These manuscripts often mirror the structure of alchemical texts, framing transformation not just as moral salvation, but as an internal spiritual alchemy. Equally intriguing are maps found among the archive's oldest materials, maps not of land, but of the heavens and metaphysical realms. These include star charts that predate known astronomical discoveries, layouts of angelic realms corresponding to planetary spheres, and circular mandalas that scholars interpret as visual theologies of creation. Symbols within these diagrams correspond with known occult systems, the Hermetic microcosm-macrocosm, Pythagorean numerical harmonies, and the astrological seals used in planetary magic. These are not metaphors. They are believed to be tools, visual incantations designed to align the practitioner's soul with higher realities. One widely rumored manuscript, known only by its unofficial title Codex Lux Tenebris, the Book of Light and Shadow, allegedly contains a fusion of Christian theology, alchemical transformation, and hidden cosmology. Said to be illustrated with colorless inks visible only under specific lighting, The text details the symbolic journey of the soul through initiatory trials. Each phase is represented by a different sigil, some drawn from Solomonic magic, others untraceable. Those who claim to have glimpsed it describe feelings of unease, euphoria, and temporal disorientation, as if the book itself were a spiritual labyrinth designed to test perception. Despite technological advances in decryption and manuscript analysis, many of the Vatican's coded documents remain untranslated, not simply because of linguistic difficulty, but due to intentional spiritual obfuscation. Esoteric traditions often encode meaning within layers: the superficial story, the symbolic association, and the vibrational pattern encoded in sound or shape. This suggests that understanding the content may not be possible without the proper spiritual orientation, initiatory background, or vibrational readiness. The reader must be transformed in order to perceive the deeper meaning, thus protecting the knowledge from misuse. To compound the mystery, several manuscripts use what researchers call narrative obfuscation, the weaving of disinformation into texts to guard the real secret behind allegory or distortion. For instance, a text may present itself as a commentary on a saint's life, but subtly include an inverted Latin acrostic that spells out an invocation. Others embed gematria, numerological codes based on Hebrew and Greek letters, that hint at hidden dates, names, or eschatological warnings. The deeper one reads, the more the text resists being read. It becomes a mirror, reflecting back the reader's own limitations until they surrender interpretation for revelation. Ultimately, the coded materials within the Vatican Secret Archive reveal a worldview in which symbols are not merely representations, but keys to reality itself. They reflect a philosophy that predates reductionist science, a belief that the cosmos is a living language, and that through numbers, shapes, and sacred sounds, one may commune with the divine, alter the material world, or ascend to higher states of consciousness. The presence of these symbols within the highest halls of Catholic secrecy suggests that the Church, despite its official doctrine, has long known that power lies not in dogma alone, but in what is encoded, hidden, and preserved in plain sight. And the greatest mystery may not be what the symbols say, but who they were written for. Despite the Vatican's recent attempts to rebrand the Secret Archive as the Vatican Apostolic Archive, access remains intensely restricted and tightly controlled. The renaming may have softened the public image, but the iron barriers of approval, oversight, and secrecy remain unchanged. Gaining entry into even a small portion of the archive is not a simple matter of academic curiosity. It requires a vetted identity, formal credentials, institutional affiliation, and, most importantly, a pre-approved request for specific documents. There is no casual browsing, no exploratory research, only precision, supervision, and silence. Only about 1,000 scholars have ever been permitted access to the archive in any given year. And even among them, entry is limited to a small number of rooms. The documents themselves are requested by exact reference only. Browsing is not allowed, and the true catalog of the archive is unavailable to outsiders. If a scholar cannot identify a specific file by title and content, they will never be granted permission to view it. This system is not just about order, it is about control. By obscuring the full index of materials, the Vatican ensures that researchers only know what the Church allows them to know, and nothing more. Among those granted limited access, the majority come from a select network of institutions: pontifical universities, Vatican-approved seminaries, and a few globally recognized research centers. These researchers are often individuals whose careers and ideological alignment already mirror the Vatican's worldview. In other words, they are unlikely to ask dangerous questions, and even less likely to publish heretical conclusions. It is a vetting process that favors preservation over inquiry, loyalty over truth. Beyond the realm of academia, rumors abound regarding special access granted to certain individuals and groups under strict confidentiality. Whispers speak of high-ranking clergy, secret orders within the Church, and operatives tied to intelligence communities or religious think tanks being allowed into the deeper levels of the archive, the so-called shadow vaults. These alleged subterranean chambers are not on any public blueprint, and their existence is denied. Yet multiple sources, including defected clergy and retired Vatican personnel, have made veiled references to rooms without names, sealed chambers with no visible doors, and protocols that override even the highest public permissions. One name that consistently appears in speculative accounts is the Jesuit Order. As the Church's most intellectually formidable and operationally secretive body, the Jesuits are believed to have both curated and accessed materials in the archive that pertain not only to theology, but also to geopolitics, metaphysics, and esoteric philosophy. Some accounts even suggest the existence of a special division within the Society of Jesus devoted to knowledge deemed too powerful or destabilizing for the public. A kind of theological intelligence corps responsible for monitoring, preserving, and, when necessary, obscuring the truth. Then there are the claims of non-Catholic access. Figures from elite circles, esoteric societies, and even Masonic or occult networks allegedly given conditional entry under ancient pacts or silent diplomatic arrangements. While the Vatican officially condemns Freemasonry, historians have long noted periods of cooperation and mutual tolerance, particularly in areas involving rare manuscripts and historical preservation. It is possible, some say, that in the shared interest of secrecy and power, these lines have quietly blurred. What motivates this tightly restricted access? The answer lies in the Vatican's historical understanding of knowledge as power, not in the abstract sense, but in its purest, most dangerous form. To those who see the archive as a vault of lost truths, access is a key to reshaping worldviews, challenging authority, or even altering the spiritual trajectory of civilization. If certain contents within the archive can disprove doctrine, reveal new cosmologies, or confirm the presence of ancient metaphysical forces, then denying access is not only logical, it is existentially necessary. The Vatican Secret Archive, shrouded in centuries of silence and sanctified control, is more than a storage facility for ancient documents. It is a psychological monument to humanity's unease with truth, memory, and power. Its contents may remain hidden, but its consequences ripple through culture, religion, and the collective unconscious. Whether one believes in the archive's most extreme rumors or accepts the Vatican's official explanations, the very existence of such a place inspires myth, fosters obsession, and shapes a metaphysical narrative in which knowledge is both salvation and threat. The deeper one delves into this hidden repository, not physically, but symbolically, the clearer it becomes that the real danger may not lie in what's inside, but in what it represents. One of the most persistent warnings surrounding the archive is the belief that certain knowledge, once uncovered, cannot be mentally or spiritually contained. Scholars and theologians throughout history, who pushed too close to forbidden insights, often met with dramatic ends, whether through public censure, mysterious disappearances, or sudden deaths. Giordano Bruno, though executed for heresy in 1600, is often cited in modern esoteric circles as someone who may have accessed materials or insights linking early Christian doctrine with Hermetic and pre-Christian philosophies. His cosmological theories, which posited an infinite universe teeming with life, were not merely scientific heresy. They were a direct challenge to the spiritual hierarchy maintained by the Church. There are whispered legends of researchers who, after encountering specific texts within the archive, fell into madness or despair. These stories speak of sleepless nights, sudden personality changes, obsessive behavior, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Some claim that exposure to certain materials carries what could be called a metaphysical contagion, a thought pattern so alien, so paradigm-shifting, that it corrodes the structures of belief necessary for psychological stability. This is not the fear of punishment or exile. It is the existential vertigo of being confronted with a truth so vast, so foreign, that it dissolves the very idea of truth itself. Several accounts mention the existence of what might be considered cursed or psychically reactive documents, manuscripts said to exert an influence upon the reader not just through content, but through presence. In one alleged case, a sealed grimoire in the archive was reported to cause unexplained illness in clerics tasked with moving it. In another, a reader became increasingly disoriented while studying a medieval volume on angelic hierarchies and had to be removed from the site. While these reports cannot be verified, they form part of a broader pattern in which the archive itself becomes a character in its own mythos, a guardian, a test, or perhaps even a sentient repository of suppressed force. Beyond individual consequence, there is the mythic dimension, the belief that the archive holds prophecies or warnings tied to humanity's collective fate. Some say that locked within its deepest levels is a document known only as the Final Revelation, a text believed to be so devastating in its implications that it is reserved for the last pope alone. The content of this alleged document remains speculative. Some claim it concerns an alien origin of the human race. Others suggest it reveals the falsification of central religious narratives. Still others believe it contains a date, a time beyond which history itself becomes unpredictable. Whether real or imagined, this idea captures something essential, that the archive is not just a relic of the past, but a cipher of the future. There are also warnings from within the Church itself. Some modern theologians argue that the archive's secrecy has created a spiritual imbalance, hoarding the light of ancient wisdom rather than allowing it to illuminate the world. They speak of a karmic debt, of hidden knowledge festering in silence, warping even the institution that protects it. The idea is that by refusing to let certain truths be known, the Church may have trapped itself in a cycle of fear and decay, unable to evolve, and doomed to defend illusions it no longer believes in. In the esoteric tradition, there is a concept known as the egregore, a collective psychic entity born of shared belief. Many believe that the Vatican Archive has become such an entity, fed by the fear, reverence, and speculation of millions. This egregore, shaped by centuries of secrecy, may now guard the archive as fiercely as any man-made security. It manifests in dreams, in nightmares, in a cultural sense of unease that something vast, ancient, and powerful is being kept from the world. The idea of such a psychic presence is not allegory, but ontology, an unseen consciousness whose only desire is to remain hidden. Yet not all consequences are dire. There are those who claim that even the idea of the archive has served as a catalyst for awakening. The hiddenness of its contents forces seekers to look within, to question accepted histories, to rediscover ancient wisdom through their own intuition and experience. In this view, the archive is less a prison and more a mirror, reflecting our collective fear of our own forgotten potential. The myths, however extreme, serve to remind humanity that there is always more beneath the surface, that what has been suppressed can still be remembered, and that silence is not the absence of truth, but the space from which it can return. But therein lies the danger. If the archive's true power lies not in what it holds, but in the belief systems it shapes, then its most profound influence may be invisible. If the Church has succeeded in defining what is and is not worth knowing, then it has done more than conceal documents. It has shaped the boundaries of inquiry itself. The result is a culture conditioned to mistrust the forbidden, to flinch from the unfamiliar, and to equate mystery with malevolence. This conditioning may be the most successful form of censorship in history, not the removal of information, but the suppression of curiosity. The Vatican Archive stands as both relic and riddle. It holds the past, shapes the present, and guards the possibility of futures unrealized. Whether it is a vault of divine truth, a storehouse of dangerous illusions, or a library of psychological thresholds, it remains one of the most symbolically potent places on Earth. And the warnings, whether real, imagined, or encoded into the very architecture of secrecy, continue to echo through time. Some knowledge liberates, some knowledge destroys, but all knowledge demands responsibility. And perhaps that is the reason why some doors were never meant to be opened. Not because they hide monsters, but because they hide mirrors. So now, as we emerge from the shadows of this hidden vault, we are left not with answers, but with echoes. The Vatican Secret Archive is no longer simply a place. It has become an idea, a boundary between the known and the unknowable, a monument to all that has been withheld in the name of sanctity, order, and protection. For centuries, its locked doors have preserved more than just parchment and ink. They have preserved power, the power to define reality, to erase alternate histories, to elevate one truth while silencing countless others. And in doing so, the archive has become a paradox, a sanctuary of divine knowledge and a prison of spiritual suppression. As you reflect on what might lie behind those iron gates, consider what it means for a single institution to guard the crossroads of history, theology, science, and myth. Consider how many ideas, discoveries, and visions have been buried simply because they did not serve the prevailing narrative. Consider how many seekers were turned away, not because they were wrong, but because they asked the wrong questions. The Vatican tells us that what is hidden is too dangerous, too sacred, too misunderstood to be seen. But history has taught us that the most dangerous thing is not knowledge. It is the fear of it. Perhaps the true legacy of the Vatican Archive is not what it contains, but what it represents. The possibility that truth is layered, complex, and sometimes terrifying. That human history is more intricate than scripture and more expansive than official timelines. That within every sealed manuscript and every suppressed gospel lies a mirror, one that reflects not just hidden facts, but forgotten aspects of ourselves. We will likely never see its full contents. We will never walk its deepest corridors. But the pursuit of its mystery forces us to think deeper, to question louder, to imagine wider. That is its true gift. The silence calls us not to obedience, but to curiosity. The locked vault challenges us not to wait for permission, but to seek the hidden within our own minds, memories, and myths. So remember this: The most forbidden library in the world is not beneath Rome. It is within us. It is in the questions we were told not to ask, the books we were warned not to read, the knowledge we were trained to fear. And somewhere in that forbidden space, waiting patiently in the dark, is a key. Not to answers, but to awakening. Thank you for walking this path with me. Until next time, stay aware, stay searching, and never forget. The truth is never lost. It is only waiting. This is Occultum Veritas. Farewell.